His research focuses on undersea warfare and maritime competition, military innovation and acquisition, and the broader military balance in the Indo-Pacific. Shugart served more than 25 years in the U.S. Navy, where he last worked in the Defense Department's Office of Net Assessment. He served as a submarine warfare officer during his military service, deploying multiple times to the Indo-Pacific region, and commanding the nuclear-powered fast attack submarine USS Olympia from 2013 to 2016. Following his submarine command tour, he served on the Navy staff as the principal officer providing oversight of the Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine program and the Navy's highest priority acquisition effort. Over the course of his military career, he served on board both fast attack and ballistic submarines, as well as at shore headquarters. He also served on the Joint Staff as the principal officer responsible for nuclear strike planning, advising of senior Defense Department leaders on nuclear weapons employment plans, and the training of presidential military aides and command center personnel on nuclear command and control. His writings have appeared in all of the prominent political journals and military publications, and he's appeared on various media outlets in recent years many, many times. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval War College, and he holds an MA in National Security and Strategic Studies. He is also an honor graduate in mechanical engineering at the University of Texas in Austin, and received postgraduate training in nuclear engineering from the U.S. Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. Now, I want to say that Mr. Shugart, Captain Shugart, came to my attention when I attended a talk by him last July at the Council on Foreign Relations here in Washington. And I was so impressed by that talk that I said, we've got to get this person in front of an ASU audience. He was quoted in a recent New Yorker magazine article entitled, "Is the U.S. Ready for the Next War?" A very apt title for his reference point today in his talk. And in that article, there is a paragraph which in part reads, "Credible deterrence requires a force that can hypothetically defeat your opponent's force." And Captain Shugart is quoted in that article as saying, "The scale of the Chinese buildup is amazing. There hasn't been anything like it in peacetime since the Cold War." And I know that's going to be part of the subject of what he speaks about today, which is the comparison and contrast with China as a potential adversary, and whether or not the United States has built the proper deterrence for that possibility. So, Captain Shugart, the podium is yours. Welcome to ASU.
Thank you for that introduction there, Ambassador Sheffer. Also, good morning to all of you. Ambassador Sheffer, Ambassador Holt, Ambassador Moore, General Freakley. Thanks for the invitation to join you all today. It is an honor to be part of your deterrence series. It's an important topic for sure, more so by the day it seems. So what I would say is that this idea of integrated deterrence, which has been talked about a lot, I'm not sure how, not quite as much talked about in this administration as the last, but nevertheless something to be thinking about. Talks about linking not just the instruments of military power, but also the industrial base, technology, governance, and the strength of our alliances. And it's an important concept. Today, I want to talk about how the physical, getting down to a granular level, how the physical resilience of our forces has become what I think is quite a neglected, but is a very vital part of deterrence on our part, of deterring aggression by others, in China in particular. And why, in particular, again, getting granular, I think the time has come for what I would call a concrete dome initiative. This doesn't sound glamorous, right? We live in an era of artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, drone swarms, But when deterrence fails, wars aren't won by buzzwords. They're won by those who can fight through surprise, and surprise happens all the time. It's happened to us many times in the past, and it will again, and yet still sustain combat power under fire and bring it back. And we have been surprised over and over again. Korea, Chinese surprised us in Korea, even though we should have seen it coming. We've been surprised in everyone's experience here in 9/11. I think everyone's experience, but maybe some of you don't remember as well as I do. So being able to fight through that and come back from surprise is dependent on the most basic sense on survivability. So as I'm sure you all know, as people who pay attention to current events, on June 1st, Ukraine launched Operation Spider's Web, a mass drone attack against 5 Russian bomber bases deep inside Russian territory, which Russia clearly thought was not vulnerable. These strikes destroyed or damaged several Tu-95 and Tu-160 bombers, aircraft roughly equivalent in cost and capability to our own B-52s and B-1s. Later, and kind of similarly, Israeli forces carried out a covert operation inside Iran using small drones, again, launched from within the country, again, to strike surface-to-surface missile launchers and air defense sites, degrading Iran's capability to retaliate. And we saw there was very little they could do after that to Israel. So both events demonstrated a truth that I think have profound implications for our national security. That is that modest expendable drones can create strategic level effects. The interesting part here in these cases is they don't need large warheads to do this. They just need to ignite what is already there, fuel, munitions, or other volatile materials. In effect, they act as detonators for other explosive material. A 5-pound drone that strikes a fuel tank on a bomber or penetrates a solid rocket motor can trigger explosions equivalent to tons of TNT. Now, across the United States, it is not hard to easily imagine similar vulnerabilities. Airfields, fuel depots, munition storage areas, Navy ports, where billions of dollars of equipment sit exposed 24/7. A single successful attack on a major bomber base, for example, could destroy a significant portion of our long-range strike capability. And because an attack could be executed remotely, it could be carried out with very little warning. This is not theoretical. We just saw it happen. It's not a next war problem, or it could be our next war. It is a vulnerability that's visible from space, and our adversaries can see it. Now, I think that in the context of a potential US-China conflict, this vulnerability becomes particularly important. China is not Russia. China is an economic superpower with the world's largest drone industry, producing about 70% of drones globally. Also, its military doctrine specifically emphasizes paralyzing what they call the powerful enemy. We know who they're talking about, by surprise, disabling its command nodes, airfields, and logistics before an opponent can respond. Chinese military publications openly discuss striking air bases and ports as the first move in a Taiwan scenario. Now, in such a conflict, our forward bases in Japan, the Philippines, and Guam would come under heavy missile and drone attack. In those first hours and days, America's ability to respond could depend upon aircraft launching from the continental United States. Bombers, tankers, command and control aircraft. If those aircraft are caught on the ramp, their loss could be catastrophic. The initial balance of power in the Pacific could shift irreversibly in hours. Now, you might think, well, we have all those nuclear weapons, right? We do have nuclear weapons left, nuclear options. Why do you think China's building up their nuclear capability like they are? So they have a survivable second strike. So now those options are also off the table for us. Now, a Hudson Institute study that I co-authored earlier this year called Concrete Sky examined Chinese, US, and allied airfield construction over the last decade. I think the findings are stark. Since 2010, China has more than doubled its inventory of hardened aircraft shelters and built or extended more than 20 runways. Today, the PLA has over 3,000 shelters, enough to protect nearly all of its combat aircraft. In fact, it's more shelters than they have combat aircraft. Within 1,000 nautical miles of Taiwan, Chinese airfields outnumber and outprotect ours by a factor of more than 3 to 1. Meanwhile, US forces have added 2 hardened shelters in Japan since the early 2010s. The US and its closest partners Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines together only have a fraction of China's airfield resilience and hardened capacity. This imbalance means that in a conflict, the PLA could suppress US air operations with using far fewer munitions than it would take for us to do the same to them. It's not a small operational problem, this is a deterrence problem. We are inviting a first strike. And when I say to help people understand why it requires so many fewer munitions, let's get into some specifics. So so they have a hardened aircraft shelter, right? It can be destroyed, right? Many of them were destroyed during the Gulf War. Air Force leaders in some cases are skeptical of them because they saw them destroyed. But nevertheless, you have to dedicate a single large weapon to each individual aircraft shelter, right? You've got to use an entire missile if you're launching long-range missiles. You've got to use an entire 2,000-pound bomb if you can close enough. Good luck, dropping a JDAM on a Chinese airbase. As opposed to submunitions, right? If aircraft are sitting out in the open, a single missile can dispense dozens, if not hundreds, of submunitions, small little things that generate lots of shrapnel and destroy. In fact, there was a RAND study in the late 1990s that looked at the theoretical possibility that maybe someday there could be a Chinese missile with submunitions and precision guidance. And they said they did some basic math, 100-meter spread. Let's use the standard Air Force parking interval. How many aircraft could they take out? It was dozens of aircraft with one missile. That's the big difference here. So I'm neither my co-author and I, or none of us are saying hardened shelters make aircraft inviolable, but at least maybe you get on the right side of the cost curve. And certainly the idea of parking aircraft in the open when you're within range of hundreds of missiles that have submunitions. We know they're equipped with submunitions. We see them on testing ranges. I think it's insanity, but anyways. So in any case, when one side believes it can strike first and paralyze the other side, the temptation to act is going to grow. As I say, I think it undermines deterrence and puts us at risk of surprise attack. Now, let's get back home. The Department of Defense is rightly investing in counter-drone systems. Directed energy weapons, jammers, high-power microwaves, improved radar networks. But we have seen that experience in Russia, Ukraine, and Israel has shown the limits of active defense like that. Every system leaks. Every interceptor can be saturated. And an adversary with sufficient scale, and no one has scale like China does, can simply increase the number of drones or missiles until the defense is overwhelmed. Russia's use of fiber optic drones, for example, has rendered jamming ineffective against those drones. And oh, by the way, if you go look at China recently released, this is great to go look at, you don't have to look at my articles about it, but China released a YouTube video series called Forging Ahead. It's on YouTube, just go look it up. It's 5 20-minute episodes produced by the propaganda department of the Central Military Commission. So this is very much an official and authoritative Chinese set of videos. It's 20 minutes each. They're the best open source, high definition footage I've seen of the PLA ever, combined. It's all in Chinese, including the subtitles. Hopefully, I wrote Substack articles for the first four episodes so far, one more to go, where I kind of broke down the nuggets of what's happening. I'm not a Chinese speaker or reader. I had an AI rip the speaking out of it in Chinese, and then I fed all that Chinese in ChatGPT, and I'm sure it's not perfect, but it's close enough. And you can see on my Substack or on Twitter. I put the articles on Twitter too. Free to subscribe. I broke down I've got 4 episodes down, 1 to go. Anyways, what are the Chinese playing with? Anybody want to guess? Fiber optic drones. So this is not a theoretical thing. Anyways, so these drones can be assembled from commercial parts, and they're expendable. Active defenses should play a role, but we can't count on perfection. A few % failure rate, in this case, is not a rounding error, given the potential number of inbounds. It's a disaster. So let's say China sends 1,000 drones to Whiteman Air Force Base, where our B-2s are, right? Let's say we get 95% of them. Pretty good, right? 95%? Sweet. Successful defense. Get at least 50 drones. And what are people working on with drones now? Swarming capability, coordination. Okay, so 50 drones are left. They talk to each other and figure out which targets to go to. You still got 2 for each B1. I'm sorry, B2. Each B2 that's at Whiteman. Poof, they're all gone, right? we just destroyed the B-2 force. So yeah, I'm highly skeptical of those kind of defenses. So this is why I think that passive defenses, hardening, redundancy, dispersal, reconstitution, have to form the foundation of resilience. Concrete does not depend upon operator vigilance. It can't be hacked. It doesn't fail because of bad weather or software bugs. It can't be surprised. It just does its thing. It sits there and protects your assets. RAND's analysts, who work, by the way, for Project Air Force, have consistently found that passive defenses are the most cost-effective way to protect air bases. The logic is simple. Hardening reduces the number of precision weapons an adversary must expend, decreases the number of precision weapons an adversary must expend to achieve the same effect. I talked about this already, so I won't go over that again. Despite the urgency of this threat, there's little evidence that I see that the Department of Defense is moving decisively to address it. When asked specifically about hardening efforts in the light of the Ukrainian drone attack, Air Force leadership, this was in a military construction committee meeting. It was on C-SPAN. I learned that on C-SPAN, you can search the transcript for keywords. So I look for hardening, there it is. There's the Air Force 3-star. Yeah, specifically by Senator Gillibrand. Hey, in light of this Operation Spiderweb, what are we doing to make sure this doesn't happen to us? He offered vague references to a multifaceted approach, electromagnetic spectrum, the FAA, the FBI, other efforts that he didn't talk about, say what they were. But I think that's not enough to gesture at isolated, possibly ineffective protective measures. As it's, okay, we're gonna take takes a village to raise a kid kind of approach. So Admiral Rickover, the father of the nuclear Navy, once said, if you can't point at a single person and say you're responsible for this thing, then no one's responsible. And that's the sense that I get here. So this brings me to what I call the Concrete Dome Initiative. As I'm sure you've not heard about it, hasn't caught off like wildfire yet. A national level emergency hardening program to protect our most critical assets, particularly by 2027, which is no joke in my opinion. Now, the U.S. shouldn't harden everything, nor can we try. One thing to definitely understand about strategy is that strategy is all about prioritization. So if you're reading a strategy and it doesn't say what an organization is not going to do, then it's not a strategy. It's just nice talk. So I think we can focus on those platforms and facilities that I think that meet 3 simple criteria. First, they're few in number. They are essential to a U.S.-China scenario, and they are vulnerable to catastrophic secondary detonations. In other words, they have stuff on board that's going to help the thing to blow up. So some examples could include bomber and tanker bases, the backbone of our long-range power projection, and quite frankly, all that's going to be left after the Chinese get done in the Western Pacific. Command and control aircraft, ammunition depots, containing critical munitions such as like JASSM ERs, LRASM, not just everything, not all of our ammunition, but the stuff that really matters for a China fight. Key petroleum and fueling infrastructure, particularly in theater, and any ships or submarines that have vertical launch magazines that could suffer chain reaction detonations if a penetrator gets to them. Now, hardening stuff like this, that doesn't mean hundreds or probably even tens of billions of dollars. For research that Tim Walton and I did, a hardened shelter for a fighter should cost roughly $4 million. A bomber-sized shelter, maybe $30 million. Could be more, could be double that, $60 million, who knows? Compare that to the $600 million price tag for a new B-21 bomber. A few billion dollars could substantially reduce the vulnerability of our bomber force. Now, as I said, any good strategy should be about prioritizing. So what should we not do? So some examples of things that don't call for emergency hardening could include armored vehicle storage areas. There's huge numbers of them. They're already pretty hard, and they're unlikely to matter much in preventing a Chinese fait accompli against Taiwan. I don't think we need to harden command and control facilities. While these are key facilities that could be mission killed for a time by destroying communications equipment, personnel casualties, they're unlikely to contain sources of fuel for catastrophic secondary detonations. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about catastrophic destruction by small drones. Again, the goal isn't to prevent any damage, to prevent the complete loss of key platforms and facilities. In any case, to do this quickly, the Department of Defense, and I'm going to keep calling it that until they change the law, should treat concrete and reinforcing steel as war-critical commodities, invoking Defense Production Act authorities and streamlining procurement. We should use commercial rapid construction techniques, perhaps with modular components. We need to bring shelters online in months, not years. Also, I think such effort should avoid the bureaucratic tendency to hand wave and incorporate every emerging active defense technology. It should also be freed from the use of set-asides and Buy American provisions that can drive contracts toward those that meet identity characteristics, such as small businesses, disadvantaged communities, or disabled veteran-owned. I'm a disabled veteran. I don't think we need to build these things quickly. I'm even fine with using cheap Chinese steel to protect our key assets, if that's what it takes to get the job done quickly and most affordably. If they want to sell us steel below market costs so we can build shelters to protect ourselves from them, I'm okay with that. We are in an emergency, even if people haven't recognized it yet. And the sole metric should be how many high-value assets can we protect in an assured manner and how soon? During World War II, we built the Pentagon in 16 months. During Vietnam, the Air Force built hundreds of hardened shelters in 2 years. It is possible. What's missing right now, I think, is urgency. At least any visible sign of it. So now history, I'm going to skip over this part. Some people think hardening is not great, not worth it, because we took out hardened shelters in the Iraq War. But if you look at the Arab-Israeli wars, the Arab armies learned their lesson, and in '73, the Israelis had a much harder time. Israel has hardened aircraft shelters. China, Israel, and Ukraine have all drawn the lessons. They are building hardened shelters, underground fuel stores, and redundant infrastructure at a pace we are not matching. As opposed to the United States, we've allowed our infrastructure to age in place for the most part. Our most valuable aircraft are parked outside, usually under nothing but canvas. Now, while I advocate for increased defense budgets, even in the case of budgets that are flat, the money must be found. Buy fewer airplanes or fewer ships or cut Army force structure. I think to continue our current course with a glaring vulnerability to attacks that have now been demonstrated on multiple occasions, I think would constitute near criminal negligence on the part of our defense and national political leadership. Imagine the day after something like that happens. Now, this brings us back to the theme of integrated deterrence. The physical protection of our forces is not a parochial Air Force or Navy concern. It is central to the credibility of U.S. power projection. A bomber fleet that can be wiped out on the ground or ships and submarines destroyed at the pier don't just undermine our ability to fight, but our ability to deter. Integrated deterrence means connecting these dots between the defense industrial base, infrastructure, and military posture. A concrete dome effort would require coordination across the Pentagon, Congress, and industry. It would also provide an opportunity to strengthen ties with allies. Japan, for instance, is looking for ways to increase its defense spending and is great at building infrastructure. Joint contracts or co-funded shelters could reduce costs and improve operability. I'm talking about overseas shelters. There's also a broader civic dimension. Skills and materials used to harden airfields could be applied to hardening civilian infrastructure when we get done with that. Fuel depots, power grids, communication hubs. Building resilience at home reinforces deterrence abroad. And in this sense, the boundary between our national defense and civil preparedness should begin to blur. China certainly sees civilian infrastructure as targets in an integrated way. So I think we are in what might be called a pre-war decade. The difference from the 30s is at this time we know it. We can see the weapons, the trends, the warning signs. We don't have any excuse for being surprised. If deterrence is about convincing an enemy and an adversary that war cannot succeed, then survivability is the most credible message we can send. Our aircraft, bases, and ships must not present soft targets that invite a first strike. They must project the quiet, unglamorous confidence of resilience. I think that by investing now in a hardened, resilient infrastructure, we can strengthen deterrence, reduce the likelihood of miscalculation, or perhaps even a correct calculation on China's part. And if necessary, we could fight through the opening blows of a future conflict. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to your questions. I would emphasize that, as I discussed with Ambassador Sheffer, this is not all I do. I don't just focus on drones and concrete. It's one thing in particular that I've developed this bit of a rant about because I see the vulnerability and nothing seems to be happening. But I also watch the PLA Navy closely. I look at their nuclear forces. I'm happy to talk about any of those topics. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Captain Shugart. It's a fascinating set of issues to dive into. I'm going to ask just a couple of questions, and then I'm going to open it up for all of your questions. And since you are master's students and policy design studio students focused on international affairs, I know that you have many, many questions to ask. I'm sorry, is my mic off?
No, I was just asking if that could be lowered a little more. I'm getting glare over here, but that's fine. If that's as far as it goes, no worries.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. All right, Tom, that was a fascinating talk. I want to just ask a couple of sort of factual questions. Could you just elaborate a bit more on how exposed U.S. facilities actually are? You made brief reference to it, but is it something like we've only got a hardened defense or deterrence capability of 5% or 10% of aircraft and ship facilities? What is our percentage in terms of the United States, in terms of what is actually hardened at this time?
I mean, there's almost nothing that's hardened in the U.S. You have Pentagon is not hardened. It's some parts of it are electromagnetically hardened, but it's not physically hardened that I know of. You have Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, NORAD headquarters. There's an underground facility there. There's a few other hardened facilities here and there. Probably shouldn't talk about. There's very few though. There's very little hardening in the U.S. You have some active defenses, so like there's missile launchers over near the White House. There's I don't know if we have any surface-to-air missile launchers other than D.C. in the continental United States that are ready to go. Hawaii, I mean, we have ballistic missile defenses, but that's not hardening. That's active defense.
Right.
So I mean, hardening-wise in the U.S., almost nothing. Only a very few super key facilities. And those are, to be clear, those are not hardened against nuclear weapons. Nothing is hardened against nuclear weapons. Overseas, we do have some hardened aircraft shelters at Kadena, and there are some up in Misawa, but they are not enough. So I've done the math. So I did the math for my first study, first strike study I did with CNAS in 2017. So my colleague and I, Javier Gonzalez, also a Navy officer, we were both still active duty then. We did an analysis of what it would take to attack U.S. bases in Japan. And we basically took each base, and for each base using Google Earth and base directories and maps, we took what we know from Chinese doctrine they would go after, like what they have said they would go after in open source, and we matched those targets, like what would match those categories. Then we figured out how many weapons would it take to do that. Do they have enough inventory to be able to hit the things they said they would hit? And our answer in 2017 was yes for all U.S. bases in Japan, no for Guam. Guam, they didn't have enough DF-26 IRBMs yet to do Guam. But they, for every U.S. base in Japan, they could crater every runway, destroy every aircraft on the ground, hit every hardened aircraft shelter, hit every ship in port, hit every command center within a matter of hours, if not minutes. That's all using the PLA rocket force and then follow-on strikes by the cruise missiles from bombers, or H-6 bombers. So that was 2017. At that time, China had, I don't know the exact numbers, but something like 120 MRBM launchers and maybe 200 or 300 medium-range missiles that could reach Japan, and dozens of IRBMs that could reach Guam. They now have 350 MRBM launchers, 1,300 medium-range ballistic missiles. That only makes sense, if you look at the range, that only makes sense for hitting like the Philippines and Japan. It's too long a range to waste on Taiwan. It's too short to hit Guam. Probably not, they don't need that many for India, and they have the highest fence in the world between them and India anyways, and the Himalayas. Probably not gonna use them on Russia. So who are these for? I mean, these giant buildup they've done over the last few years. So I redid the numbers more recently for a client of mine to look, okay, what could they do now with the inventory they have now? Now, by my estimation and my math, it's a big spreadsheet, they could do what I said, all US bases, and now also all of Japan's combat aircraft bases, and all of their naval bases, and Guam is toast now. So I'm not sure what else is left, which is why when I point this stuff out, people will say, well, why would they want to get in a war with Japan? Okay, good point. What if it doesn't matter if they're in a war with Japan anymore at that point? Because the Japanese military has been essentially destroyed. Now, to be clear, this is if they strike by surprise. If we are dispersed, if our ships are at sea, if all of our aircraft manage to disperse to civilian airfields, this math doesn't work anymore. But it does work if we get caught with our pants down.
Sounds like Pearl Harbor 2025 for the new generations.
With one key difference, Ambassador, it's an excellent point. With one key difference, though, is that when Pearl Harbor happened, it didn't matter how many ships sank at Pearl Harbor. Quite frankly, we could have lost the battle in Midway. The Japanese were going to get swamped in 1943 by U.S. naval production that started in 1938 and 1940. Right? This was the Two-Ocean Navy Act of 1938 and 1940, which dramatically increased the size of our Navy, and we had a far larger shipbuilding base than Japan did. It didn't really matter what happened at Pearl Harbor. It didn't really matter what happened in Midway. We were still going to bury them. Now, the shoe's on the other foot, right? China could do a Pearl Harbor on us, and they have a building program underway that's a lot faster than ours, and they have a vastly larger shipbuilding base than we do. So it's different in that regard, but you're right.
Excellent distinction. Tom, can you point to any particular focus within either, or actually both, within the administration and in Congress that you would describe as being well-versed, understanding, and prioritizing the issue of hardening?
Hardening? No, I don't think so. I mean, I just don't see it. I mean, it's just not happening. Mm-hmm. In fact, you see even Air Force leaders talk about, okay, we know passive defenses are important. Okay, great. Where's the money, right? Show me your money. Show me your budget. I'll show you your priorities. And I went and looked, right? So we just had the big reconciliation bill, no hardening in it. I looked at the administration's FY26 budget request for the Air Force. I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find any hardening. And there's like resilience measures I'll talk about, which means ramp space, more fuel facilities, longer adding runways, the stuff they're doing at Tinian North on Tinian, where they're clearing out the old air base there. There's resilience measures that are happening. I could find no evidence of any hardening. Now, the Air Force will, and I've seen an Air Force senior leader say this, well, we only have so much money to go around, right? So I can't spend it all on passive defenses. I need tails, aircraft tails. Okay, great. Who's heard of the unfunded priority list? So every service at the end of the year, as part of their, actually it's not part of the budget. This is a key distinction. So this is a congressional requirement that the service has to provide, free of interference, theoretically, from OSD, their unfunded priority list. So this is them straight to Congress. This is what I didn't get enough money to build that I would like to have if I had more money. Sometimes services play games with that. They'll put things they know Congress is going to fund on the unfunded priority list and not put it in the budget. They know they need that stuff. Anyways, so I went to look at the Air Force's unfunded. Maybe if they had more money, they'd put some hardening on the unfunded list. Not even there. It's not even on the unfunded priority list. So I don't know how you get lower priority than that, to be honest.
It's interesting because, of course, in the 1930s, during the Depression, we had the WPA, which was a huge works program in the United States, building sidewalks and just infrastructure of towns all across the country. Why? Because it employed a lot of people. They got paid, and it helped, dig us out of the Depression. It sounds like you were describing during your talk just the basic employment factor. I mean, one could imagine all of these hardening projects bring a lot of local, employment available to those communities for at least some period of time, and of course help generate that within the economy. Have you ever looked at what kind of workforce would be required for a hardening exercise?
Not in any detail.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm more of a guy like, hey, we have this huge problem. I mean, I'm not the expert that has the knowledge of exactly what. I mean, that would be its own whole think tank study to figure that stuff out. I just know that it needs to happen, and it's happened in the past. I mean, it is possible. Like it's on a population half of what it is now. We've done this sort of thing before.
Exactly. Well, let me open it up now for questions from our faculty members and students.
What's more good news?
I'll start with in the back there, and she'll need a mic. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Loren Fraser. This is a topic that's pretty close to home for me. I'm currently based at Aviano Air Base, and I'm an aircraft maintenance officer, so this is something that comes up a lot. In fact, so much so that for the last few years, anytime we do a base exercise, this is our number one limb fact that we bring up. Not only do we not have HAZs, we have PAZs, which is protective aircraft shelters, so they're not as hard, but the doors don't work. So we can't even close the doors. So essentially, we can't load as many weapons. We have to worry about blast radius, and we basically can't do anything that we would need to do in a real world conflict. So I have quite a few questions for you, if you don't mind. So how can we reallocate and advocate for resources for HAZs, specifically at the field level? We raise this limb fact, we always bring it up. Our base is aware as well, but it's really maintenance that is pushing for this. So how can we continue to advocate and really get things to the higher level where it does become a priority?
Yeah, it's a lot harder when you're in uniform, because you can't really speak publicly about it. Well, you just did. I mean, I heard what you said. So now I've got more ammunition. I won't use your name, but I will say, I've heard that even the shelters we do have don't work. So, I mean, what you can do, you can write an article about it, right? You can, I don't know how it works in the Air Force with professional journals. Certainly in the Navy, you're allowed to go in proceedings and say things that are unpopular among the flags, and you can get away with it typically. I don't know what the Air Force is like. Sometimes you can make people unhappy that are in high places when you say stuff like that, to be honest. But it varies by service. So certainly that's something you can talk about. If you have an opportunity as somebody who's in an academic environment to write a paper about it, those papers can often be turned into things like War on the Rocks articles. Are you familiar with War on the Rocks? Right, so War on the Rocks is a fantastic platform. I've written it many times, where you can say things that are above the general media level, like the media wouldn't pick it up necessarily. Like you could speak at a national security professional level, but if it's a good enough story, then the media will pick it up, and they'll kind of dumb it down to their level and say, hey, we have a problem. So you could do that. Again, you got to always think about. Let's be honest. You have to think about career consequences if it matters. One thing that I learned pretty recently, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember who I heard said this, is that I've come to understand as somebody in a think tank community that whatever it is, whatever idea it is you have, somebody already has it on the inside of the government. Like you didn't just think up whatever it is that you came up with. However, they may not have a voice. So they're allies of whatever it is you want to have happen. There's somebody in DoD who has that job. They just don't have any voice. And they can't speak up in public. So like I guarantee you, I know there's somebody who's Mr. or Mrs. Hardened Aircraft Shelter within the Air Force staff, and I'm trying to do what I can to bring attention to this and maybe get them some help. But I don't know how great an answer that is, but there's a few thoughts.
When you're talking about your concrete dome initiative, you brought up it kind of applying to overseas, like in Japan. So where does Europe lie in all of this? Being in UCOM, we're having this issue like I discussed, but when you're talking about your prioritization, what would your lineup be for Indo-PACOM, UCOM, and domestic bases?
I think my top priority right now would be bases in CONUS, because they're just completely wide open. The bomber bases in particular. I mean, they're just...
And just for our audience, CONUS being...
Continental United States.
Yeah.
I'm most worried about them because right now it's almost impossible for us to harden our way out of our situation in the Pacific. And you know Pacific just because the PLA rocket force is so. Does everybody know what I'm talking about with the PLA rocket force? Yes.
Possibly not.
Okay, so if you haven't heard of them, so the PLA rocket force is an entire branch of the Chinese military that is solely focused on long-range missiles. It's the equivalent of the Air Force and the Army. Imagine if we had an entire service. All they did was long-range, mostly conventional, non-nuclear, precision strike missiles. It's co-equal to other branches. They have, as I said, 13, according to the last DoD China military power report, 1,300 medium-range ballistic missiles. So remember, you may have heard the headlines, the US sent the Typhoon missile system to Japan, and the Chinese complain about it. Oh, we're destabilizing the region. We probably sent like 3 or 4 of them over there. Those are MRBMs, right? The Typhoon is an MRBM. They have 1,300 pointed at our bases in Japan, mostly pointed at our bases in Japan. They have 500 plus intermediate range ballistic missiles now that can reach Guam and beyond, and probably some that can reach Hawaii and Alaska. They also own the intercontinental ballistic missiles, hundreds of which they've built in recent years. If you watch the Beijing military parade, if you haven't watched that, it's worth seeing. The part where they actually roll the tanks and all that, it's only about 15 minutes worth, and it's impressive. Anyways, that, to me, as I said many times, the rocket force changes everything. They are the crown jewel of the Chinese military. It is, the Chinese military, the rest of the Chinese military is pretty impressive. It's approaching world class in some areas, but it is not nearly as scary without the rocket force. The rocket force is what makes it really scary over there. And that's why I worry. I want to do hardening overseas for sure, but I think the priority should be here. I'll be honest with you. I'm sorry you're from Europe. But I mean, Russia is just not even close. Like, it's not the scale of the threat from the Russian rocket forces. The non-nuclear threat that's actually usable is minuscule compared to the PLA rocket force. You're pretty safe in Aviano, and the only way the Russians can really hit Aviano, I think, maybe a very small number of conventional weapons, or they're going to go nuclear, in which case the shelters don't really matter.
Why don't we slip to another student for now?
Great question. Thank you, Lauren.
Yes, right here. Yes.
Hello, I'm Chelsea. Kind of thinking off what she was saying. So could you not present the funding for this in a different way besides defense, like with additions to it, like stimulating the economy by creating contracting jobs? Is that who you would pay out, right, as contractors to build these infrastructures? Also creating like collaboration and unity and even trust in the government for the citizens right now who have low trust. Like, could you do that and frame it in a way to maybe get budget push for it?
I mean, we call bills all kinds of things these days. From a technical perspective, it is military construction spending. That's clearly what it is. So it'd have to be, in terms of the categories it goes under, like kind of the color of money within the government, it's going to be milcon spending. It's going to be military construction spending. Could you put it in, there's all kinds of defense spending in the one big beautiful bill, right? So you can call the bill whatever you want. And you can emphasize, there's political aspects too. You can say whatever you want about it. You can say it's going to create jobs. It's defensive, right? It's defensive. It's just concrete, right? It's purely defensive. Now, to be clear, when I look at what the building China has done, those are defensive shelters as well. But what they do is they enable offensive operations by having this hard base that they can conduct operations from. So defense is sometimes offense and vice versa. But you can, there's all kinds of things you can call it. That's a great point. And that's why I think this is a relatively easy political lift. People ask me all the time, why aren't we doing anything about this? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess I think probably mostly it's because this is the Air Force, and all the 4 stars in the Air Force, I think, are pilots. That's what they do, right? So what they want to do, they want to buy airplanes. To be clear, the Navy doesn't have any hardening at all. Naval officers like to buy ships, right? That's what they do. But also the Navy has not typically the Navy doesn't have to operate from fixed bases. Like, Navy ships don't have to come back to the base every few hours. It's a little different.
So I guess to feed off of that as well, are there maybe prototypes that you've created, tested to see how the efficacy of them at this point? Or
Building hardened shelters is nothing new. Lots of countries do it. They've been built for They were built in the 60s. So there's no magic beans here. There's no engineering miracles required to do this. It's a well-known and tested, and well, it doesn't work all the time, but by the way, I'm sure some of China's shelters doors don't work, but all the new ones they're pretty cool the way I see in the videos how they work. Because they're 100%. I mean, because a shelter where the doors don't work is going to be pretty useless against submunitions because they're going to come in the door, and drones, right? So this is like when I look at drones, protecting from drones, you've got to have that thing like hermetically sealed. Like it's got to be airlocks. I mean, not like literally airproof, but I mean, you can't have any openings or the FPV drones will come in.
Interesting. Yes. I think you have a mic right in front of you. Yeah.
Do I need it?
Yes.
I can.
Yes, use the mic.
Yes.
So thank you, Mike, former Army guy. So a couple questions. One of them being, rather than having a sheltered system, would it be more cost effective or probably way more expensive to have like a system that would drop down similar to like an aircraft carrier where you would have like a shelter underneath, and would that create more of a barrier or more strengthened, hardened shelter for something like that? And then another question too is, do a lot of installations, because I don't know, I'm an Army guy, not an Air Force guy, have like electromagnetic stuff that's already situated in case a drone swarm were to come through, since you wouldn't have air defense systems at every installation to protect against this?
So, okay, first question on the, could you have some mechanism? I guess. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer, but my sense is that would be way more expensive, and a lot more, and probably break a lot more. There are countries, including China and Taiwan, that have, they use underground shelters that are built into hillsides, particularly Taiwan's air bases on the East Coast, right next to the mountains. They'll have some that have, they go underground. China too has a fair number of bases that have underground, and we have no idea how big those are underneath, how many aircraft can go inside there. We just counted each one of those as one shelter because the only has one door. If you break the door, then it doesn't really matter what's inside, it's not coming out. So I think it's probably a money thing mostly. Okay, then in terms of active defenses, it's all classified. I mean, I'm sure there's counter drone stuff all over the place, and I don't question that we are doing that. Like we are working on counter drone stuff. But I mean, you've been in the military, right? You know what it's going to look like. There's some program, and so a couple guys have, you've got some soldiers the base may have 2 or 3. They do this, and nobody is a counter drone officer for a living, right? It's not a military specialty. So the MPs or somebody will have a handful of these things, and probably 2 of them work. And here come 1,000 drones. I mean, and they're probably fiber optic anyways. So you're going to point your thing at it and pull a trigger, and nothing's going to happen. You're going to watch them sail overhead. I don't think they're coming to Army bases for the most part, just because of what I talked about. I just don't think the Army really. They're just not vulnerable in the same way. Because again, we're talking about stuff, small numbers, right? Because this is probably only going to be a surprise attack. That's the only way it works, right? This is not something China can just do over and over again. Because part of why we have such a problem with this is that in peacetime, it is so hard to deal with the drone problem because there's so many equities involved, right? There's so much. You get FAA, like, hey, I'm a pilot. Like I fly my airplane once a week. I don't want my GPS getting fried because I flew by some base, right? I mean, I don't like that. So in peacetime, before the shooting starts, it's going to be really hard to, and you're going to have container yards. Nobody can tell a container yard you can have any containers within 20 miles of Whiteman Air Force Base. But once we're at a war, if we're in World War III, sky's the limit, right? I mean, you can shut down all air traffic within so many miles of the air bases. You can tell all the container yards within 30 miles of Whiteman Air Force Base, all the containers are gone. They're all out. I don't care. We don't care. We don't care what it costs. We don't care about your business going under. We'll give you some money, whatever. I think those are 2 very different situations. So I think it's kind of a one-time deal, probably.
Let's see. You and then Ambassador Moore.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mackenzie. I grew up in Misawa for about 8 years, so it's always a shock to hear people talk about it because not many people know it exists. I have a couple of questions. One of them is more geared towards this conversation, and the other two are just sort of generalized because I am super interested in career fields like this. My first question is, in your professional and educated opinion, do you think we've gotten too comfortable with the concept of exceptionalism? Do you think that we're just used to being comfortable, like nothing bad can happen to us because we're here, and we are kind of not necessarily taking China serious in the ways that we should? Or in like maybe even overestimating Russia. These are conversations I have with people. Some people think Russia means a lot more than they really do.
100%. Russia is Brazil with nuclear weapons, basically, with a bigger military. I mean, they're similar size economy as Brazil, about as many people as Mexico. They have a lot of nuclear weapons. Most of them are left over from the Cold War. They're fighting with mostly leftover Cold Wars. I'm not afraid of Russia. They're annoying. They're a threat to some of our smaller European allies. They're not going to conquer Europe. Europe has 10 times their economy. They have some submarines that are pretty good. I am worried about the combination of China and Russia, right? And I think it is an axis, basically. And people will say, well, they're not really coordinating anything. Well, newsflash, Hitler didn't know Pearl Harbor was going to happen until after it happened. You don't have to be, have the Joint Command Center to be an axis. So yeah, I'm just not nearly as worried about Russia as I am about China. Exceptionalism. I hear this a lot. General Freakley and I were just talking about this earlier. Oh, the Chinese haven't fought a war since 1979. We've been fighting for 25 years. Sure, we've been fighting a totally different war than what China's going to bring to us. We could lose more people in a day in an afternoon, in the minutes against China than we lost in all of the Gulf War or global war on terror for 20 years. If you look historically, Britain, right? So Britain in the years running up to World War I, what were they? They fought the Boer War against the rebels, basically. They did various policing actions around the world, they called them. It was just killing local populations, genocide in some cases. Did that prepare them for fighting the Germans? No, not even close. Didn't prepare them at all for trench warfare. In between the wars, between the 1920s and 30s, again, colonial stuff. Did it prepare them for the Blitzkrieg? No. So this idea that we're somehow these super prepared for combat. Okay, we did a job against Iran and it went great. Well, of course it did. It was Iran. I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see I posted a meme where this is an Iranian stealth fighter. Here's an actual Chinese stealth fighter. Here's an Iranian aircraft carrier. Here's a real aircraft carrier. We cannot use those comparisons. So the idea that we could use massive ordnance penetrators on an Iran that had been flattened by the Israelis, of course we can. I would have been shocked if we couldn't. And in terms of exceptionalism, what is the way the U.S. has been the most exceptional nation the last, since World War II, is naval power and maritime power. Well, guess what? China is now the world's premier maritime power by every measure except for naval tonnage. So they have the world's largest fishing fleet, the world's largest shipbuilding by far, more than the rest of the world combined, the world's largest maritime law enforcement, biggest Coast Guard by far, and they have the world's largest Navy in terms of number of ships. There's only one measure, there's only two measures that they're behind, which is sheer naval tonnage. And they've outbuilt us by 50% over the last decade. So they're catching up. And the number of vertical launch missile cells, which again, they are catching up. So that part of exceptionalism is gone. I wrote a whole Substack thing about this. It's 10,000 words long. China's going to really contest us for maritime power by mid-century, and it'll be a different world.
Thank you. And then my other question is pretty mild. I'm super interested in intelligence and strategy myself. Do you have any advice for those of us that want to get started in this career field? How did you get started? Super niche, super cool, super interested in it. That's it.
I was a submarine officer. So I for most of my career, I didn't have anything to do with, I remember an article about recruiting once. And then while I was on active duty, I got selected for the Navy Fellows Program, and I was assigned to the Center for New American Security. And I was a Navy Fellow there. I was still active duty. commander after my command tour. And so that's how I got into the think tank world. So I kind of see it as, when you're looking at think tank people, you tend to get, I think, two flavors, which is one is academics. You have people who have got a PhD from somewhere. That's their bona fides, is their doctorate from somewhere. And I'm not a doctor or a PhD. I never did anything like the kind of research they do, and I don't have any illusions that I did. So they have a certain kind of expertise. Then you have people who come from other professional backgrounds. They're career military, or maybe just part of their, they did enough time in the military that gave them a good foundation, or their career State Department, right? Lots of different, they have a professional competence that's been generated by actually going out and doing stuff. And then they apply that. Suggestions for how to get into it. You can join the military for a while. That's not the most direct route necessarily, but it is a route. I have seen a number of people in the think tank space who have done, become reserve officers. So like reserve intelligence officers. That's an option if you can get a clearance, if there's no issues for you. And then that's another option to kind of, weekends and 2 weeks in the summer, so to speak, kind of see behind the curtain. And I think that helps to bring a little bit of street cred for doing the think tank thing. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Okay, we've got a final question from Ambassador Moore.
Thank you. Congratulations. I think you have successfully alarmed the audience about the vulnerabilities of our land-based aircraft in the United States and around the world in a kind of a surprise attack scenario. It's disturbing to hear that you seem to be a lone voice in the wilderness, but at least you won't be alone. There'll be other voices now. I guess my question to you is, in that surprise attack scenario that you've described, how vulnerable, or do the Chinese have a solution for neutralizing our carriers, our submarine fleets, and so forth? And does it matter, even if they don't have a solution?
So they have, so for carriers, I mean, they threaten the carrier pretty, I mean, all those missiles, those 500 IRBMs we talked about, they're essentially all swappable to anti-ship capability. So those can reach out past the second island chain. So our carriers are at risk, certainly at risk from the first minute of a conflict. And I would anticipate that if they really decide to go big, any that are in range are probably going to get hit. Because if you look at the way ships typically do against missiles, the ones that aren't alerted, that get hit, that weren't expecting it, almost always get hit. And the ones that were expecting attack almost never get hit. Because usually it's soft kill measures, it's jamming. Like you jam the inbound and usually it works. But if you don't see it coming, so the SAM will be actually that was a mine. The USS Stark, the Israeli Corvette off Lebanon, they didn't see it coming. So if we don't see it coming, we're probably going to get hit. After the shooting starts, I'm not saying that there's a hard line we shall never cross 2,000 miles from China, but it's going to be hard. It's going to involve risk. It's probably going to be episodic in nature. We're not, at least in the initial part of a conflict. Eventually, we might knock down enough of their ISR capability that maybe after a while we gain more confidence. But I mean, But here's the thing about carriers: at least they're moving targets, right? I mean, as Admiral Paparo, the Indo-PACOM commander, said pretty memorably, the positions of our air bases were known when the tectonic plates stopped shifting. They're not going anywhere. So a little different question there. Submarines, that is one area where we have a very significant advantage still in the undersea. I think they can operate with confidence pretty well in that part of the world. The only problem is numbers. So we have, we're in what's called the submarine trough right now, where we basically quit buying submarines after the end of the Cold War for about a decade, and we're still paying for that. So as large numbers of Cold War era Los Angeles class submarines are decommissioned, we're building Virginia class new ones, but we're not building them fast enough. And so we went from in the 60s down to less than 50 attack submarines. Right now, we have major problems with maintenance, and a lot of them are stuck in port. Like 30% of the fleet is stuck in maintenance right now. That should get better over time. Also, oh, by the way, in the next few years, unless there's some sort of extension, and maybe there will be, are 4 SSGNs. So an SSGN is a guided missile submarine. So this is our first 4 Ohio-class Trident ballistic missile submarines. The first 4 of them, they used to just carry 24 nuclear-tipped missiles. About 20 years ago, they got converted into guided missile carriers. So 24 tubes, 22 of them are turned into Tomahawk cruise missile shooters. So they put 7 Tomahawks in each tube. So each one of those submarines can carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, which is a lot. The other 2 tubes are storage for like the SEALs for their stuff, so their power bars and workout equipment or whatever. And the other 22 are Tomahawks. Well, all 4 of those ships are going to get decommissioned in the next few years. So our total volume of submarine launch, vertical launch Tomahawk capability is going to drop about 40% over the next few years, which those are the launchers that we know can get close within range. So I worry about that. And the thing you have to remember about a Taiwan invasion is that even if we can get submarines in, it's just numbers and time. So here's the thing you have to remember is that if China really does decide to invade Taiwan, it's not just the PLA Navy that's going to do it. It's the PLA Navy and their merchant marine, which is the largest in the world. So in case you don't know this, China's ferry companies actively train, there's literally one training right now doing landing exercises in the Taiwan Strait. Their ferries are huge. They have about 70 of them. They are formally they have a part-time job as part of the Chinese maritime militia. They regularly take part in landing exercises. They can send amphibious assault vehicles straight to the shore from these civilian ferries, right off a modified ramps off the back. So what we would expect to see on game day against Taiwan is not a few dozen ships, it will be hundreds, if not thousands of ships. Also, there will be Chinese maritime militia fishing boats. They will have radar reflectors on them that make them look bigger as a bigger radar target than they are. They will probably have noisemakers in the water that make them sound like bigger acoustic targets than they are. So you can have your submarines going in there. Well, each submarine goes in, it's got 24 or so torpedoes. Just do the math, right? There's just not enough weapons. Even if you could rotate a boat in every day and it unloads its entire torpedo room at the other side, you're not gonna stop them with that. Now, there are other ways you can stop them if we were being smarter about things. And we're working on it. I mean, to be sure, like there's, replicator initiative. Taiwan's buying a lot of mines. Although I'm convinced that unless they might lay the minefields now, like Taiwan needs to do basically a surprise minefield laying against China, essentially what needs to happen. Because if you're counting on laying the minefield after a crisis starts, well, guess what? I mean, if you think Xi Jinping's going to watch the Taiwanese lay the minefield that's going to stop him, you're being naive.
I know we're over time, and Ambassador Moore, do we have time for just one student question that has come in? You're okay now?
I got all morning. I'm retired, so.
Okay, hang on with the applause. We've got time for your question if you'd like to ask it. Is there a mic or not?
Thank you, Captain. This has been very insightful, and I think the threat is real, as you said. And I think there was an intelligence assessment for 2027. I think the whole conversation was focused on only defense, and I think if we were waiting for them to come to our shores, we have failed already. So aren't there any strategies that we can hit them hard and not be caught by surprise and be the side that does the initiative and launch first in case we're picking up the fight if they hit Taiwan at the beginning? Because I don't think they'll hit us first, they'll hit Taiwan. So why would we wait for them to attack us? And I would say this is why we have over 800 bases around the world.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, so why aren't we should be prepared to fight overseas and not have them come here technically and fight at home?
So, okay, let me start with one thing real quick. We'll talk about the 800 bases thing. Thank you for bringing that up. So I encourage all of you to go look at that list of 800 bases. So I saw that article, Quincy Institute put that out, right? Of course they did. and the 800 basis number, right? And it's been repeated. You have lots of company and elite media. Everybody says that number, right? I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard that. So I went and looked at the database. I wanted to look at the actual list of what are these, because just as a military member, just as my kind of gut feel about how many, like what I would call a base, it sounds like way too much. I mean, I think maybe 100. So I went and looked at the list. So the one that jumped out one of these bases was a dog cemetery in Guam. Literally, it was a dog on the list, dog cemetery in Guam, like for guard dogs. If you looked at Naval Base Guam, it wasn't one base, it was 12 bases. Like there were 12 parts of the base that they called, so it's literally one base. Basically what they did was DoD puts out a list of base sites. So they're called base sites. It's DoD's, and what the researchers, David Vine is the guy that did this study, he'll point at it and say, well, it's DoD's list. They said these were all base sites. Okay, so DoD will basically call so like the New Sano Hotel in Tokyo, that is a military hotel. It's a military installation. That's one. That's a base site. Does anybody think that's a base? No, right? So when the researcher publishes it, he has the care to say base site, but then it gets repeated by everybody else, and also, by the way, by Quincy Institute, which should know better. It's their study. They call them bases. So now what all of us think about is what's a base, right? That's a big installation, hundreds, if not thousands of people. That's something, the image you have in your mind. So that we have 800 of that overseas, when that is not what we have overseas. They're base sites. It's completely misleading. It gets repeated over and over again. I beat this drum as hard as I can. It's a lie, basically, and it gets used against DoD all the time. I'm not criticizing you at all for saying that, because again, it's been repeated by, you have a lot of good company. Anyways, that's a horse I love to beat. I put a whole Twitter thread about it together. If you just do T-Sugar 3 and Dog Cemetery, you'll get it. Anyways, what your question was?
The offensive option as opposed to...
Yes, the preemptive strikes.
Yeah.
So why don't we just do preemptive strikes? Well, I mean, militarily, yeah, there's all kinds of great reasons to do it. It's much, I mean, certainly in the era of precision strike and targeting, it's a huge first mover advantage. It's probably bigger than any previous era. The problem is we're a democracy, and I don't think the American people would be super kind about us launching a war against China. I think we're just going to have to take the hit, basically. Now, does that mean we have to let them? When you say come here, I'm not worried about China invading the United States. I am worried about them doing limited strikes in the United States against key assets. I don't think China's going to invade the United States. But I mean, I could see second half of the century on current trend lines, we might lose Guam, we might lose Hawaii. Probably not Hawaii, but definitely Guam could be at risk. Now, to be clear, they'll engineer some sort of, the locals, they've always said they don't want to be Americans. Some proportion will say that. So we're liberating them. That's happened before. Also, the problem too with executing preemptive strikes against China is that scale. It's just scale. It's just so big. I mean, like they can execute strikes against us because we have like a dozen air bases. They have 134 air bases within 1,000 miles of Taiwan. That's just a lot of volume. I mean, they're going to see it coming. Also, you have to remember that there's a big asymmetry, that their force is a missile-based force. So there's not a lot of warning. If somebody that mostly relies on ballistic missiles launches against you, there's very little warning. They just have to drive the trucks out and launch for the most part, at least for that operation. Now, people will say rightly, if it's for an invasion, you're going to see all the invasion preparations happening. Maybe, yeah, you will see something, but they may just call that an exercise. Like Putin did that against Ukraine. It's just exercises. Also, I can see a use case where the big strike happens and then they assemble the invasion force, because their doctrine says that. If you look at the sequencing of operations in the landing campaign part of the Science of Campaigns from 2006, they very specifically say, seize air, naval information dominance, joint firepower strikes, then you assemble the invasion force. So if you've got a missile-based force, it's pretty easy. And in fact, we saw in a New York Times article, I wasn't quoted in it, but I helped out with it. Maybe I was quoted in it, I don't remember. Anyways, Like one of their bases, for example, one of the Rocket Force bases now has, this reporter showed me, hey, they've got like 36 new launch sites right next to the base. Why are they doing that? Is it for testing? I'm like, the only reason I can think of is that they have 36 launch sites right next to the base. So they can literally roll the trucks out. They don't have to go very far. They just go right there and they launch. So your warning time is cut that much less. Why does this matter for us striking preemptively? Because we are not a missile-based force. We are a platform-based force. And so in order to launch strikes at any significant scale against China, we have to assemble lots of aircraft, lots of air defense suppression, lots of ships. They're going to see it coming, and they will not be surprised in the way we could potentially be surprised.
Okay, thank you very much, Captain Sugart. That was magnificent. Thank you so much.